Well, thank you for staying tuned in. You're listening to the Seer in the Dark, and I'm your host, Jessica Ariel Morocco. And at this point right now, I'd like to introduce to you Sevan Bomar. Hello, Sevan.
Wholeness, Jessica. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful.
Awesome. I'm glad we got an opportunity to connect tonight for, another amazing journey through consciousness. Obviously, I'm ready. I'm pretty amped up. I've had an awesome last 2 weeks. Lots of information that's been coming out, and I feel really connected to just the expansion that we're all experiencing here on the planet, especially with delivering new information about how that's going and what we all can do to increase that. So definitely, thanks for having me on the show.
Well, I'm very, very happy that you were able to join me tonight because I think we're going to have some really interesting things to think about tonight. I know that when I first contacted you, we had a very nice conversation, but it was mind expanding. It was you touched on some topics that really made me think. What is going on, and starting to think the way you were thinking in that whole point of that mental spiritual expansion
Yes.
that's occurring. And I just can't describe things as you do. I want you to share a little bit about. I shared with everyone about your background, but there is a lot of interesting things that you've done. I mean, your website's amazing, and it seems like you were an innovator of quite a few things. But what I'd like to do is to begin with, how old were you when you realized your deeper spiritual connection?
Oh, actually, great question. Well, first I would like to say, again, thanks for having me on the network. And I always, these days, have somewhat of a disclaimer before I get into these conversations about the deeper levels of spirituality. And that's really first to tell an individual when we go on this adventure to discover more about our physical life, our spiritual life, etc. We have to realize that we're getting into a vehicle, per se. And that when we get into that vehicle and we begin to travel, sometimes we can confuse ourselves as being that vehicle. And so in this, I want people to understand that I'm going to be speaking about things that have been taking place on Earth, things that have been happening in the timeline that we're actually in. But there is a place that has no time. There is a place where everything is collected in together. So it's a place before the Big Bang, I call it, or before division. And we have the opportunity to go on these trips and look at our history and look at all that we've been through in a stage of appreciation, not as a way to cause any levels of conflict. And while we go on that trip, we can learn a lot of things, especially if we put ourselves into it from just a level of understanding that this is something that we are going to have to get through. We're all going to have to learn. And the easier it is, the easier we learn that. And I'm getting just a little background noise here, but the easier that we take it on ourselves to learn this information and to expand, the more we can expand. And so I just want to say that so everyone just understand we're going to get into this physical 3D body ship, and we're going to go into our existence, and we're going to see how things are set up. So for me personally, like I realize now in my life that every single point had a very unique meaning to it. And for me, earlier in life, I was actually acquainted with the spiritual world or God rather early. But I can remember even the first time, and it was when someone told me that you could pray and ask God for anything and that He would give it to you. And I can still remember this like it was yesterday. I was actually in the car when I found this wonderful news out. And I just couldn't wait till I got to the house. And I remember even when we pulled in the driveway and I ran out of the house and I ran out of the car and ran into the house and ran upstairs and I got on the bed and I got on my knees and I prayed and I said, God, I want all the money in the world. Because this is about how much a child really understands about these concepts that adults have about what they believe God is. And needless to say, I think by the time I got 16 or 17, I had what would be, for me, all the money in the world because I couldn't spend any more than I had. And that was by developing and creating computers. But I experienced early in life, basically, that money was definitely not going to be the end-all, finish-all, and solution for things, despite what my peers were saying around me. And so I had this thing when I was younger to always pursue the spiritual world, but it first started as something natural, and that was really through my lucid dreams, that I could actually go into these dreams. And I can remember ever since the age of maybe 10 or even 8, going into these dreams and seeing things in the dream and then grabbing them and then waking up, hoping to find those items here. And obviously it doesn't work like that instantly, but I started to notice that within a certain period of time, certain things that I grabbed would eventually arrive in this reality, whether it was a bicycle or something of this nature. And this was something that I thought that everyone could do. So it was never me going to someone else and saying, hey, I can do this, can you do this? In fact, I even forgot at a certain point, by the time I started turning 14 or 15 and was just ready to get rid of everything out of my life that had to do with being inside of any religious institution, I can remember being at a point where I just, how can I put it? It was just a very interesting time in my life where I forgot about my spirituality. And this is a very interesting point, because I think that the reality that we're actually living in has a program going on at times that pushes us away from understanding, as I call it, meaning going in depth inside of yourself to figure out the truth. And then it puts you on another program that's like external. So everything is outside of you. The God is outside, and you know, everything else is just outside and something that you need to reach in the sky or whatever. And so basically through early in my life, I had begun to develop a spiritual aptitude, then forgot about that spiritual aptitude, went into the world, and began to live life as I wouldn't even say a normal person, but as a person with a spiritual background that I was running away from. And often after I reached the peak in what I would say is the peak for myself in the world, I started hearing the spiritual world beckoning me back, because I felt like I was maxing out the material world with what could be accomplished and what could be possible. And I would say that at a very, very early stage, I started to make that turnaround. So when I was about when I was about 19 years old, 19 to 21 years old, I started making a turnaround to go back into spirituality. And so this wasn't a very short period of time that I was away, and then I came back. And then this is what started the aggression of the spirituality, or the spiritual world, I'll say. Because from the time I was 21 up until I was 26, I was going through these spiritual transformations that were progressively getting more and more aggressive. And it in itself, it kind of peaked at a point where I had a very, very strong spiritual experience in which I was imparted a lot of information about etymology and about language and about even the English language, and a code that resides within the language that will explain to you everything that's gone on here on the planet, because you can't just change a language immediately. And this built into writing the code of the matrix. So I'm giving you basically an overview of understanding that since I was younger, I've had a spiritual background, and then I went away from that for a short period, then came back into it, and then this was right around the time that a lot of this stuff, as far as this recent wave of spiritual consciousness began to happen. But I had a very good soil, let's say, of understanding of how spirituality functions and works, especially from an integral level. So.
Yes. And, well, you know, it's very interesting, the point that you brought up about being a child and remembering and knowing how to do things, how to manifest things. And no one ever taught you about manifestation. It's something that you came into this lifetime knowing and remembering. But what's really interesting, and it's a perfect example of how, for some reason or another, we begin to forget it. We start to disconnect from it as we get older, and there's that phase and that point in your life where you went from knowing it, remembering it in the earlier years, as we all remember certain things and start experiencing that and have recollections of different types of realities. And then at some point we start to lose it. Right. Because we're either not prepared to really embrace it yet, or we start to just feel like we don't want to be different in any way, or don't, we want to just experience things the way others are. And I don't really know how it happens for each individual.
Right.
I remember doing it myself, where I was seeing things and knowing things, and then, I avoided it, and I did this multiple times throughout my life. So
Right.
that point really stood out to me.
And then, and we live in a life that, it doesn't primarily support spiritual expansion. But that actually became one of the things that really began to pique my interest as I began to go through my later 20s, was when I did start realizing that there was clearly something going on, and that there was some spiritual world and different things that wasn't talked about in school. I started becoming very suspicious of the reality. So would be like, for most people, the 9/11 phenomena, when they started figuring out that, hey, this stuff is occurring, and maybe the culprits that are involved are different than we really think. It kind of shatters the reality of what you believe. And for me personally, that happened I had a spiritual 9/11, to where my towers or my spiritual beliefs were torn down because of figuring out the affiliation of who was really behind the organization of spirituality. And so this to me was life-shattering in a sense, because I didn't trust life for a certain period of time, meaning that I was like, well, if they're not saying anything about this whole other dimension in this plane that's here with us, and it's not a subject in school, and it's not something the president's talking about, then what could be where could I really be at? Like, what could be the ramifications of what space that I'm currently in, and who's possibly in control here? And these are very mature thoughts. As I said, they're more of adept or adult thoughts, because you start taking personal responsibility for yourself. You realize, in a sense, the way that you came in here as a solo child, it was the same way you're going to go out. Like, very seldom do you leave the earth with other people at the same time. So this leaves one to have a personal responsibility at figuring out what exactly is going on in this matrix. And so I started coming into that information very aggressively, and I started pairing that along with my past experiences of being inside the mosque, being inside the church, or being inside the temple, and what I had seen there, what I had personally logged, because again, I had a genuine interest at an early age also to figure out what happens after death. That seemed to be the second phenomena that occurred after me discovering God, was I also discovered a few days later death, meaning that there was some small animal that was there dead, and then I was asking, well, what's going to happen? Like, where is it at? And then I got the whole, I don't know, only God knows, and this kind of explanation. And then so it created a time of discomfort for years, to a point where I would even be in a scenario where everyone would be having fun, and maybe there was a big deal that was done or something, and then I would be the only one sort of sullen inside, though. And then I would ask myself, well, what's wrong with you? What's going on? And I would feel this twinge, and it was like, oh, because you still don't know what happens when you die. And so it doesn't really matter, all of this gaining that you're doing and all this happiness that you're claiming, it can never be truly fulfilled until you have the answer to that question. And so this is like I said, it's a preparation phase also for the stages of a very advanced being, or one who is coming to give information to individuals of a higher caliber. And that's only so that we can continue building, because we're all building collectively. So when someone discovers something, if we think about how the world is really set up, there's only a few hundred people that thought of the inventions that we're using today that have metamorphosized the world. And you'll find in every tense that, let's say for instance with flight, it wasn't everyone at the same time thinking, yeah, we need to fly, and then everyone working on building something that could fly. It was one person or two people or a group of people saying, what if we could fly? And then starting to put things together that would actually be able to sustain us in the air, until finally going through the trials and errors, because obviously nobody wants to get in one of these crafts when it's time to test whether it works or not. But then,
Right.
its final introduction into the reality where it's now Boeing, and it's now Delta, and it's now all of this. And I often comment on this, even with our willingness to go into the next stage that we're surely headed to. Because if we went into the industrial age and we started telling people then about this space age that was eventually going to come, everyone would be looking at us like we were out of our minds. But that didn't stop
Right.
the space age from coming. So in every tense, I would have to sit one moment to ask myself, well, what's coming next? So if I can prepare myself and do, as I said, as an adult that's protecting and caring for themselves, my due diligence at figuring that out. And so, of course, this leads to many things when you approach it from that level, because your will is really what begins to drive you into these discoveries. And as you go inward, if that is your process first, then you start realizing that all of what you're experiencing and all of who you are is somewhat of a map to not only what's been going on, but also what it will happen. And so what I'll say is that I spent now the last 3 or 4 years coming up with a microcosmic, macrocosmic connection of our life experience. So that way when we get into very heavy subjects and topics, it's a lot more easier for the person to accept what's going on, because there are other metaphors, other dimensions per se, that we could see the same kind of behavior on. And this comes from everything to understanding our full potential as a unit, to also seeing the malevolent forces and how they affect things that are divided. And, we could see, multiple things if we look into the mirror of nature. And we also look into the actual real meaning of symbolism, not the new syndicated meanings of symbolism that has been taken over by those who want to have charge over such powerful symbolism. So, this is integral.
Mm-hmm. Well, this gives you a lot to think about. And like the point that you brought up earlier is during the industrial age, would they have believed what we would have accomplished at this juncture in time? And no, they would have said that, they would have laughed at us and thought it was nothing more than fantasy. And, and likewise, our future, what does that hold for us? And we can't really mock any of it, because, it's amazing what humans are discovering and what they can do.
Exactly.
But we're coming up to our next break, and we have only a few seconds left. But when we come back, I'm going to ask you a little bit about the work that you created that went viral called The Code to the Matrix. Yeah. And so you have to hear this. I want everyone to stay tuned in, and we will be back with Sevan. Well, you're listening to The Seer in the Dark. I'm your host, Jessica Ariel Morocco, and I have my guest here today, James Evans Bomar, or also known as Sevan Bomar. Hello, Sevan.
Hey.
And so before we went into break, I really want everyone to share the story about your earliest work and called The Code to the Matrix. And also, I have some notes here that there's a free copy of it online if a person would like to read it. Is that correct?
That's correct. The book was, I did self-publish it and make it available for free for everyone who wants to enjoy that information of, exactly what's going on with the language and what's going on with the structure of this particular planetary system. Especially, the work itself was somewhat dualistic. I was definitely quite appalled at again what I discovered, and it was very difficult for me to avoid the truth, because I was finding signs of it within the language and within the geometry, and obviously understanding it to a complete level now. It's more of a system or a blueprint that many people are indoctrinated into, especially when they're going through the spiritual and religious institutions that are set up in the world. And so what happened with the Code of the Matrix was, I call it my crystal skull. It was after my transformation and I became in the know about knowledge and information of the planetary system, I then had to release that information because it was in the tense inside of me, and because it only being there, because I wasn't finding this stuff on the internet, I wasn't finding this stuff in the works that were available, I felt that it was my duty to bring forth this work. And so I finished the Code of the Matrix in about a month and a half. It didn't even go through its final editing, but it was released, and I felt at that point that, okay, I can kind of go and fade into, maybe going to Tibet or something like that to figure out, what had actually happened and, what was going to happen to me from there, because I was, again, spiritually activated. And I had seen and witnessed things that were quite vivid, so I wasn't going to be able to go back and assume that I had not seen what I had seen. Mm-hmm. And
Yes.
so once I published the work, it seemed to immediately catch the attention of multiple individuals. And so I left my information in the book, my email address, and then a quasi website that I had set up just to receive certain information. And then people started to ask, okay, so what else happened and what else have you discovered? And there was a moment for me where I really sat in that room and I had to make the decision of whether I was going to actually start bringing this message or if I was just going to let everyone that read the book just read it and get their own interpretation off of it, and that was it. I was truly done with the world from a level of just getting involved with lots of people and trying to get into anything that didn't leave a small footprint, meaning that I wanted to, in a sense, sustain myself by not consuming a lot. And that to me meant not even interacting with a lot of people and not going places and doing things. I had come to Costa Rica, so the nature was beautiful enough for me, and so I was in that stage of my life. And so while I was there, because I've always had a lot of integrity myself and I've stood up for others in many cases, but I asked myself, are you doing your best? And meaning that, am I doing my best to make sure that this information gets to everyone? And I've seen my best, like I've seen, having to ace a test that you didn't study for and you're just going to go and take it the next day. I've seen where, I've walked a city, the entire city at night just because the bus didn't come and because I needed to get somewhere in the morning. These kind of parts where you really, really get to the fiber of who you are, the core of who you are. And so I'm not a liar, and I'm not definitely going to lie to myself. I was saying, I'm not doing the best I can by just self-publishing this thing and putting it on Scribed. I could do a lot more. So I started answering questions. And, here I am. I'm thousands of questions later, networks later, radio stations later. And the information is still growing. I even have new stuff to deliver in the conversation. And people always understand my conversations to be expansive every time, meaning that you can always come and get something new as we keep digging into truth and figuring out what it's really about. But it also is like a train. It's like when I first get on the line, it's like and I just got to even get into the proper frequency and frequency match for a moment to get into the stage of consciousness to where where we left off last in a tense, and the synchronization that's all happening to us when we're enjoying this kind of information. And to me, it's also the way that we charge now, like this form of getting information. This is not just science fiction. It's science fact, or it's something that is actually giving us information about ourselves. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy fact. And so this has a way of enlivening us because as I'll get more into this conversation, there's been huge potential discovered within the body. See, what was leveling me out the most still during these spiritual experiences is I was like, imagine being able to harness this potential. So I wasn't so much as blinded by the light and just all into, the experience itself and just trying to map it down to some deity that I can prostrate to. I was trying to figure out its real uses within our reality, because I did start noticing very clearly our reality suffering from lack of innovation and stuck in a rut or a Kali Yuga of utilizing non-efficient things while continuously going in that direction by conflict. And now I see it on a much grander scope that what we're all experiencing, we continue to experience until we choose not to. It's your choice. And
Right.
what's happening here is that the round and around the merry-go-round, if you think of the earth spinning, chakra spinning, aura spinning, it's easy to get dizzy. You're in a gravity well. You're below the speed of light. You're in a vacuum. So you have to think of how all that would really affect you, just that alone, from your stage of consciousness and what you really know to be doing and not to be doing. And so this is the time where we challenge our ego to, does it really know everything, or is it really, it's founded on a firm foundation that's stable, or is it shaky? Are we still believing the world is flat? Are we still believing that we can't fly? Are we still believing that there's no such thing as other life forms and other extraterrestrials? Or we're the only ones here? Is this the only world? Like these kind of very childish, if you look at this from a macro scope, This is a very childish way of looking at
Right.
existence, and so thus that's
Or
kept us
safe.
limited,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, it's also safe,
Right.
to say that, well,
Safe.
we'll stay within these confines. Don't step out of the line. Don't think that there's something else beyond there. Don't go, get in your boat and travel and fall off the face of the earth because it's flat. Just don't explore.
Right. And then
And
and then there's becomes a fear of the unknown, and this becomes it's almost a riddle that tumbles upon itself. If you don't know yourself, then there's a fear of discovering who you are.
well,
And then
that's what it is. Yes.
and then that's of course one of the major keys to spiritual experiences is that you can't really keep going into spiritual experiences without recognizing what you're seeing as another form of you, because
Mhm.
and that's internalizing the experience versus if you keep encountering things externally and not getting into the tune of all this self and that this is just another part of you on the timeline, then we leave ourselves open um, to be subject to other energies and other life forms that have set up those kind of traps of dependency. So in a certain sense, if we depend on ourselves and understanding all is self, so we're depending on each other, then that means that there's no specific person delegated to do something. That's going to be the king. That's going to be the God. That's going to be the angel. There is it within every single being and entity. And this is what I seen is the collection. This is what goes on before the separation. And this is a time in which everything is living through each other, and that's what's creating the magnitude of the experience. Where we are now is that we're trying to experience the reality just for ourselves, or this energy, this spiritual life form, whatever. We're trying to experience it just for ourselves, and it has way more energy than one individual can hold. It's so enigmatic, you would need anchors, meaning people that can keep you stable while you're going through the field of understanding limitless, right? And
Mhm.
so this is where it makes it a group effort. I start calling this now open source spirituality, because one thing that I was very aware of after this entire spiritual experience was that the energy that is associated with our higher states of consciousness is something that must be circulated through probably our entire species if we ever expect to fully harness its potential. And so that could be called the Earth Mother, the Kundalini, etc. The energy is so strong that when coursing through just one individual, it becomes very difficult for them to stay cohesive. But when
Mhm.
being shared in groups, it has much more application, especially if those groups are configured in the same kind of blueprint, let's say, as the structure of the universe. And this is when you have groups that are set up like modules. You create the microcosms inside the macrocosms. You have one person that's the brain, one person that's the heart, one person that's the intestines. You can even lay it out in a sense as the chakras. And each person fulfilling those particular goals and then functioning as a unit, also oscillating and learning what each person has become, quote unquote, a master at in order to completely master the innerverse, rather than the universe and all these
Mhm.
external spaces where we want to exercise control, where control has not been given. Meaning that if a person thinks that they can sell their soul, it's impossible to sell something that doesn't belong to you. It is not a soul, there's no such thing as souls. There's only soul. Soul means one. So it's something that comes where we're all together and we're all collected. And so that's why they like to play around with the language and give us words like sell, which in a sense means to sell something or get rid of what you have and that you've purchased. But on another token means a unit or form that you've created that other things can exist in. So this kind of confusion with the language and doublespeak with we call it the forked tongue, this creates a great deal of confusion for beings that are really just trying to figure out where to even begin. And so one of the main things that we've been able to develop, without getting too deep into the knowledge, is more of a approach, which we call the mind, body, and soul approach, or the MBS, at how to triangulate yourself, meaning pinpoint exactly what is your more weaker node, so that way you can start working on bringing that one up so it can come into balance with the other systems in your body. And we found it very effective to go at the physical body first because it is the most dense of our 5 bodies. Let's use that system. And so what happens is that when becoming identified with the body, it is known to be, it's known as a person becoming identified with a shell or staying in a specific mold. And even though they may shapeshift or grow out of that mold for a moment in excitement, they compress back down into this geometry or mold in time. And this is like when you have a magnificent dream and you're flying and you may even be some other kind of being. And then in the morning you look in the mirror and you identify with what is in the mirror. So you get coalesced back into this shell and this title and this tag known as James and Jessica. You see what I mean? And again, these worlds, physical worlds being developed solely upon division. And that's why we have to understand the use of the physical world. It's not something that we should begin to hate or begin to loathe, but something that we should understand as something that is a challenge to work with because we're used to being in another state. We're used to not being divided. We're used to being together. And again, that's quite apparent within our subtle bodies. And,
right.
And then I'll kind of give this metaphor. In the physical body, if you're hungry, I can't eat for you. So in that tense, with the physical bodies, they're separate. But if you're in the same room with me and something's wrong with you, something's bothering you, and I'm sensitive even just a little bit, I feel what's wrong with you. And this is because the more subtle bodies are actually overlapping. They're generally very similar to magnetic fields. And so instead of me just having my own magnetic body, when you're in the room, I'm sharing that with you because the body is more denser. So we figure out less dense. And we figure out the lesser the density of the bodies that we have, the larger they are and the more that they connect. So our entire goal in this life was to become more familiar with our less dense bodies. And they said this was when you begin to learn how to project yourself beyond your magnetic body, beyond the field of your physical body. And what the field that you're connecting with is the field that everything else is connected to. That's how you're actually getting larger. You're using other objects and other organic life forms as a medium and a bridge to expand your awareness of what is around you. So if we're only using then this body identified, not even 5 cents anymore, 4 cents specimen in order to interact with such a magnificent, beautiful reality, we know that we're going to have a problem with our carrier, meaning that we're not going to get the full experience. Just like if I'm trying to explain my spiritual experience in this English language, it's like shoving it down, just like shoving an elephant down a straw. At times things are going to be heard and that person's going to take that wrong and they're going to be caught up on that. And it's because the language, if you notice, is the major intrinsic part of our programming. And I know we probably are coming up to a break here, so maybe we can come back to that. But the programming in the language is every bit of what needs to be looked at in order for us to first realize we're thinking in this language now. We're making actions in this language. So we have to know what it means in order to get more clarity about why we're coming to certain conclusions in life.
Right. We have about 10 more minutes in this segment, okay. But I would interject a little bit and say, just today I had a wonderful conversation with another light worker, and we had the discussion about being empathic, and both of us, she and I have this strong, sense of empathy. When we're around people, we can pick up things, sometimes good, sometimes it's bad. Being in a crowded room or even just a few people of whatever energy that they're feeling, we're kind of getting a sense of what that is. And however, I said that there's a point where people feel that they can conceal this. They can, have the exterior body reflect, a smile, but on the inside they're unhappy or they're angry or there's something else going on. And those that are in tune with this empathic side to us, or those that are opened up more, like our chakras are opened up more, and we can pick up and utilize this form of information, this telepathy that I believe was originally our form of communication.
Right. In a very transparent form of communication also. It really leaves no margin for lies, and it leaves no margin for errors. And it's interesting because when you look at the earlier languages, as these languages were being developed, the earlier ones at least hold numerical systems that are checks for this kind of behavior, meaning that in ancient systems, you can find that if you add up all of the sentence of what a person is saying, a certain number equates to that they're lying. So there's a whole nother way of checking what is coming out from this individual in the tone and vibration. But as things become more disguised and words become interchangeable for other words, then we lose sight even of it. And to tell you the truth, that words, if we think about it, is if there was ever any inventions that changed anything that in this world, and you even look at the word world, you remove the L and it becomes word. It's the words. The words and the tones and the vibrations are what is shaping these realities. And to not know what it means to intone, or to not even have the ability to intone because of chakra being damaged, is in a sense muting us. This gives us automatically a problem with our throat chakra, one of the most integral parts to connecting that pinion of the body, where the command center or the head needs to connect with the body, and they need to come into harmony with each other. But because there's no communication, meaning if you see as above, so below, many talk about, and they think of it on an occult level. But if you think about, if you put something in your mouth as above, it's going to affect below, like what goes on in your stomach and what happens in your liver. So this is where even the senses from the higher worlds, your desires to eat or drink or whatever, can go to war with other planetary systems inside of your own body or your own innerverse by drinking some alcohol or some MD 2020 or whatever. And this is the battlefield. And then what we see in the world is only just the aftershock. And we have to realize that our real control point as souls, and then now, since dividing from the soul force, becoming spirits, as spirits is still on the spiritual plane. So that is where we primarily operate. That is the cog that is spinning before this one gets to turning. And that's why people who operate primarily in the spiritual fields have the premonitions. They're aware of things that are going to take place before they occur. And then likewise, it's now it's just, to me, I see the magnificence of it. I've always been an optimist. I'm not a glass half empty person. And so what I'm watching in our experience is that we're going to be fine. That I'm not seeing these disasters and dangers because I understand how we exist on the spiritual level. We seem to come into recollection of who we really are very easy when there's no governor or 5 sense body wrapped around us. And this is like when you see yourself in the dream world sometime and performing feats, you start to wonder, where'd you learn that from? Or if you go into some type of psychedelic experience or something and you start having opportunity to even view other kind of realities and worlds, and you see the percentage of people in this world that actually have the ability to do that, which is very low, you start saying, well, who am I? Is there a great work going on within me? And all I need to do is focus on that in order to allow myself to get this basically the plans of what needs to happen. Like basically that you didn't leave yourself without a solution to this situation. When you finally wake up, the body is the immediate map to the universe. So it's an interesting thing because as we're making our progress back towards where the Big Bang took place, if you understand how time is created, as we make our way back there, we're now beginning to collect. And that's why I believe a lot of us are beginning to come together now that may have been diametrically opposed against each other at a certain point. But it's where we're all coming closer, and you're even finding people, and this is a phenomenon that I'm recording more than ever, is you're finding people that seem to be really you. Had you made certain decisions? And some people say, well, where will we find evidence that there would be a 0 point or there would be a critical mass or that? And I always knew in my life, I said, when you find another person that is basically the other you, like the doppelganger, that's when you would know you were getting closer. And this life that I'm living in now has me bumping into people that even have the same name as me, bumping into people who have the same type of story with their mothers and their fathers. And we're all here at this point seeking to solve a grand riddle. And so I think who else better to solve these riddles than some of these jokers, some of these jacks, some of these Jameses, even this whole house of cards, right? And
Right.
then let's solve it, finish it here, because I started realizing that as long as we keep running from it, and this is the fear of who we are, we talk about the fear of the unknown, the fire, as it's often called. As long as we keep running from it, as long as it keeps being hot to us, then we're always ensuring that we're going to be in this, okay, I need to protect you, okay, you can't stand on your own kind of mode. When the reality is that that's not us. The human being is designed as a master template. Some people will say, oh, the animals are older and these other entities are older. No. We're older. It shows within the genes and the DNA. Anytime you can mix and interbreed with this many species, you're gaining all the knowledge. You're making an oath or a pact with those other genetics in order to carry them forth, because humanity is hardwired to survive. It was like before they even thought about the ramifications of what could take place with thousands of spirits stranded on the astral plane, they were more concerned about just getting spirits on that back onto the astral plane. And this is what you see with our ancestors, more involved in the actual reincarnation process and how to keep souls going into vessels, even if they're just animal vessels. So this is like something that once you get started, the macro minds, the eidolons, even the archons, as they're called at times, are constantly engaged at a scene of plugging one hole for another one to pop back open. And then that's why I keep saying to people, when you identify some kind of enemy, if you just understand simple mathematics, they can only be your parents. In every tense, it could only be something that is further back on the timeline, and thus still acting in a primordial state that
Right.
equates to what it's doing. And I know we're at the 10-minute mark, but
Yeah. No.
that's what we're
Well.
talking
Actually, we
about.
have like a minute left. But it does bring us back to interweaving that whole concept of when we all open up and remember who we are, and we're more connected. We start to know and understand each other without even saying any words, so that the
Right.
language no longer interferes.
Right, and then
It's just
that
incredible.
Babel, that Tower of Babel, which means just to not understand what a person is saying, which is even in the scripture what is going on, it collapses in a tense,
It
and there's
does.
no longer this wall. And I know we're coming up on the hour, but there's no longer this wall between what happens after death. Like we see in the division symbol, there's a dot, then there's a wall, then there's a dot. These symbols mean something even more integral, and they're sending us a message and saying, this is what's really happening. The separation is creating the fears.
That is amazing. I mean, we could just keep going with this one conversation. I just want to mention really quick, if anyone wants to call in, I'm going to have that open for the last half hour. So the call-in number is 267-507-0072. And please stay tuned in. We will be back with Sevan Bomar and the Seer in the Dark. We will stay here. Come back and join us and listen to hear whatever else comes up in this conversation.
Which would be quite a bit.
Yes. Well, thanks for staying tuned in to the Seer in the Dark. And I'm talking to Sevan Bomar. And Sevan, we have maybe about 3 to 4 minutes before we go into another break, but I did want to mention you were talking about creating a lighter, your body, physical body being dense, and so it looks like you've actually discussed quite a bit about being connected to the Ayurvedic diet and a lifestyle that helps the physical body be a little bit lighter and more spiritually connected. Maybe you could say that in your own words.
For sure. I mean, just to nutshell it here in this short period is that you are what you eat. And so what happens is that the more a vessel becomes fed, it's just like it's like hooking up a car. You know, you could put a radio in there, and then you could start putting an amplifier in there, and then you could change the oil, and you could change the kind of gas, and you can even change out the engine. And you can start doing all types of modifications. And so with your body, it's the same with your bodies, I should say, plural. It's the same thing. You can do modifications and expand in certain areas and unlock abilities. And what happens is that a lot of this hinges on how much amplification we have, like how much energy do we actually have coursing through our being, because that's going to determine how far we can go into these fibers and into these tunnels and into these networks of who we are, things that we've forgotten because we've given no power to it anymore. And in every case, sometimes our power is being diverted, because in the ancient times, you spent a certain portion of your time and your energy looking into the connection of you and your ancestor, because your ancestor was like your parents. And so there was a constant consulting with the ancestor and needing to be connected because of the cyclic nature of the universe, that it was known that you were never going to really approach anything new under the sun. That all this stuff has been done before, and someone's messed it up and someone's got it right. So if you can consult with the ones that have gotten it right, which would just be you on another side of the timeline, then you can constantly go with these in a perfect path in a tense. And so, I'll leave it at that until we come back. But in speaking of the application that can be done to the bodies by choosing to eat and choosing not to eat certain things. So basically decreasing the strength of one body to bring it in balance with another body that it's been devouring. So the physical body has a stance of at times devouring the spirit body, meaning not allowing it to have any leeway with what it eats and what it believes. A person can become fully carnal. And so this is about understanding these different bodies, what they eat, what they need to be nourished, and then going into the proper diet and regimen daily to get the maximization out of what you're putting inside of yourself. So like I call it superfoods for superhumans.
Yeah. And we'll be right back. We'll hold that thought and we'll talk about it some more. Well, thank you for staying tuned in. This is Jessica Ariel Morocco, and you're listening to the Seer in the Dark. And just remember, as I mentioned earlier, we're having this great conversation with James Sevan Bomar, and the last half hour of the show, I'm going to open it up for questions. I just wanted to give James the opportunity to share some interesting points. So the call-in number, once again, is 267-507-0072, and that will be after our break at 11:30 or so. So hang on there. And hello, James.
Hey.
So we were talking about diet, and you also talk a little bit about monotonics, or the use of minerals in our diet. Would you like to share about that, or?
For sure. I mean, monatomics has been something that I've been steering a lot of attention into for the last, I would say, 6 to 7 months. Obviously, we're all familiar with the lure in a sense of monatomic, or alchemists creating dirt into gold. And it always appears to have a lot of mist around it, meaning that there's a lots of different claims of what it can do and who was involved, etc. But personally, I've understood it from an entirely different level, which is today what we eat, like if we eat a potato and if we eat some kind of pasta, we have to ask ourselves, what is the nutrient, or what is actually fueling the body when you're eating this stuff, and what body is it really catering to? So if I'm eating, let's say, some kind of oatmeal, it's going to cater to my physical dense body more than anything, versus if I eat some magnesium, it's going to cater more to my auric field than anything. You see what I mean? And so we have to start realizing that we're extremely malnurtured. But even now, you're seeing another as below metaphor, that for the first time we have people that are obese but are also malnurtured. And so some people say, well, how can that happen? And it's, of course, because there's no nutrients in a McDonald's cheeseburger or any of these things. So even though you're getting larger if you're eating these kind of things, you're not definitely getting more healthier or stronger. So we decided to personally look. Well, personally, I decided to look into minerals, and then I made it a group project, and we started looking very heavily into if you were putting very purified elements in the body. Let's say you have to take magnesium, you have to take iridium, you have to take calcium, Some people think calcium is still a white pill when calcium is in fact a metallic substance. So you have to take these kind of nutrients in order, because they're the basic building blocks of your body. But what happens if you can't get those nutrients in the proper form? Like, for instance, calcium needs to be either pulled from the ocean, or it needs to be chelated or put in some kind of form where it actually can absorb into the body. And so even the common calcium that you see in the store, that calcium down that CVS aisle or that pharmacy aisle does not go into the body. So you have this war going on, and it's a chemical war, I call it, with the ones who know chemistry, aka alchemists, versus those who don't. And it doesn't even get as deep as you having to understand the quotients and understanding the formulas and these kind of things. It gets as deep as understanding just that if you can simplify it for your body, if you can bring it in a state that has at least amount of toxins as possible, then your body is going to be able to really extract the energy that is inside of it. And this is a very sticky topic in itself, because we have to ask ourselves, well, why do we need to consume energy from other life forms? And this gets us into some real conversations about, what is our actions as beings or that could even live in a self-substantiated state, meaning that a human being is calibrated in its highest state to live even without air, that it could absorb all of what it needs from the reality around it, because the prana of the reality was extremely high before we started to chop it apart and divide it and, rip the people that lived on it and the animals that lived on it off of it so that it couldn't keep nurturing itself in a perfected ecosystem. So what I'm saying is that prana, which is also affiliated with chi, but many of these energies have specific names and specific uses. It has the capability of completely regenerating a human vessel. So the individual actually stays in somewhat of a stasis, not aging and feeling like they're very young as the clock is being rolled back, because they're constantly in self-discovery. And again, I'll explain, when you come into this world, what makes it so exciting as a child is because you don't know anything about it. So every single thing seems like an adventure before you start figuring out what's really going on, which doesn't take some children very long. And then the dissipation starts, meaning the letdown of, that we're not going to fly like the Jetsons, and that, the money is not being backed by gold, and, all these kind of huge letdowns, right? So
I get let down all the time by those thoughts. So.
Right? And it's very interesting, because somebody's got to pick that thing back up, because that's the foundation that a whole nation like America is set up like a body. We have North America, Central America, and South America. So we're all in this one American body together. We just want to start taking it from there and then expanding that. Because if you understand America has been the role model and the prototype for this world for a long time. And people have looked up to the Americas up until recently. And this is because of the knowledge and information that has gone out about the corruption and the affiliation of the idea of what America stood for. But that idea is still embedded deeply within the people that grew up there, and there's nobody that can change that. Meaning that if you want to use the term heroes, if you want to use the term saviors, if you want to use the term innovators, creators, inventors, they all come from these territories that have been, right now, of what we're seeing, completely governed by forces that have been holding back the potential, trying to harness the potential of something that is very intelligent while still keeping it a slave. But that the reins are popping off. And everyone has to still realize that while people are still trying to figure out if they want to have a spiritual experience or not, the spiritual world exists. It's not contingent upon whether we believe that it exists or not. It's like the sun. Whether we get upset and we don't want to do anything for people tomorrow, it doesn't mean that the sun feels the same way. The sun is not differentiating between which person to shine on and which one not to shine on. And that's why it's on that level. And so that's why I also say about the unity that's coming here rapidly. And that's why we're again coming together and saying, look, we're playing a game with ourselves. We're in phi, so we've divided ourselves so much in this color spectrum or prism Like when you see the prism, when you shine the light into it, there's 7 colors. Actually, there's 9 colors. But the reality is that that division is how physical realities are created. So we're starting to realize the point before the prism came into existence, before pyramids in the knowledge of the netter, or the pantheism, meaning the stages of the sun and all the different traits that it exercises when it's 12 in the afternoon, or 2 in the morning, or even at night, and the different stages of these cosmic beings, that we start to look outside as if there's something that's individual and separate to us, but now the power comes when it's placed back inside. And not only that, because that's always obviously been accomplished by many different societies, are harnessing the energy of the star power, magnifying only certain stars. Like, people don't understand that light magnifies. So if you can see it in a mirror, you can bounce that light and bring it back into magnification and use it as some kind of a healing force, or intelligent force, or communication force. If you can't feel something, you just need to amplify. And so this can be understood or understood by a caveman, and you'll still find Cro-Magnon's DNA in crows running around on Odin's shoulders. And then we can't grasp that this is possible, but yet every night we go into a dream, it's a whole nother world you're thrusted into, and you're like, whoa, like, I'm looking at the details on the wall of the dream, conscious that I'm looking at the details on the wall of the dream, and then realizing that, man, maybe we should start utilizing this. This is, again, what I was talking about earlier. When I was younger, right away when I started tapping into these kind of things, it was automatic for me to say, well, why are we even on a curriculum like what we're on right now in school? And we could just do this. We can learn here. We can harness the full potential of dream time and collapse time. We can meet in other spaces. The people who end up taking some kind of psychedelic substance for one moment realize that this is possible. Everyone that's strapped in there like a Quaker never hears about it edgewise as the archons are at watch, because that's their position as watchers. Fixed stars, trees, like old grumpy archon back there holding down the first line of DNA, pissed off at times because we've metamorphosized into a metamorph, meaning that we've changed our DNA constantly to still show our resilience, but our courage to keep the change coming till we can reach the perfected state, not saying we're perfected already. And that's the other thing about this whole thing, is that a lot of beings are going to be sitting down for the university classes once again, or in this sense, an Innerversity, right? And so these classes and these courses have us looking at our body, have us connecting our body right away to the planet, and then have us starting to realize very rapidly where we are, and then it stops this whole dizzy. I call it Alice in the Wilderness. It's all ice, the white rabbit in Alaska. We want to know what, when, who, where, all the W's of the forest, in a sense, and this is the zigzag, the buzzing of the disturbance in the mind when it doesn't know what it's needing to do next. You see what I mean? The in the whole thing. And so I see these gaps, and I see them in myself. You see what I mean? It's like, instead of trying to find people that I can judge to figure out where this is going on and these impediments, I've looked at myself and I see, well, maybe some of these experiences that you've had in life affect how you see things, more so than that being really how things are. What do you think? And I have enough courage now to say, man, I think you may be on to something. I think we may need to redo everything. Let's go do some spring cleaning. Let's put everything outside. And then let's take it step by step with a cataloging system, this I'm doing in my mind, of what exactly is coming in here and its authenticity. Because if I just come off a book that says, I'm not, the being that's in charge says, I'm not the author of confusion in one chapter, and then the next chapter says, let us go down and confuse them. A being that says, cursed is anyone who hangeth upon a tree, but yet chooses to hang his son on a tree. And then a being that is actually saying he's a he, but in the language that was originally written in, he means a she. And that, when all these confusions begin to come up, I have to go back and I have to say, man, where am I at? I can't leave it up to someone else. And so that's what this whole thing has got us now, is that we're back into this, we're awake. Instead of trusting...
Taking ownership,
Right.
Taking ownership.
Exactly, like getting rid of the Oscar or the butler who just tells us what we want to hear. This is what the symbolism is. They can tell you what you want to hear and you get a reward and you feel, oh, I've achieved it. No, getting rid of that particular idealism and saying there's always something to achieve. I can always keep spinning this thing tighter. It'll be even like a generator. It gets wound tighter as you keep working with it. But remember, I tell everyone, it's energy, and energy likes to move, or it wouldn't be energy. So it's a constant thing, this balance. It's not a neutral as we see it. Like some people think neutral is you stop. No. This is like you're running back and forth so fast, it appears that you're in two places at one time. That's a bodhisattva. That's an evangel. That's a messiah. They see them coming and going. These are the people who bring the messages from quote unquote God or the supreme being to the people, because they are the bridge that the people scarcely, they begin to start crossing over and getting the concepts. But remember, the trip over the bridge, there's something that takes place. As these people are crossing you and walking over you, some people have to think about what's been happening to them in this reality when they became more helpful to other individuals. But as people are crossing you and walking over you, it comes with the territory. This is what we have to realize as bows and as bridges, is that we're strong. We're sitting on a ark ourselves. And so we can take this lot back, meaning that we stop letting them degrade what our symbols mean and degrade what we mean, and we put strength back into it instead of trying to turn our back on it. And I talked about this today, and it was one of the first times I had an opportunity to bring up the story, which I'll explain very briefly, about the confined one. It is very important for people to understand that there are other life forms here. And one of those life forms, codenamed the confined one, was inside of the ark, in the base of the pyramid in Egypt, trapped in time, in stasis, which is created in the vertex of a pyramid. So there was something, a child, that's why he's also known as the child, Yaldabaoth, that did not have a mother because it wasn't born in the pleroma, meaning it wasn't born inside of a womb. This is known as the Gnostic tradition between Sophia and her son, Yahweh or Yaldabaoth. And it's interesting how we keep approaching this same topic lifetime after lifetime about gods who set themselves up before people and begin to allow the people to wander after them, right? And how we deal with those situations, right? And now we have to go into a whole nother level where we see all these beings with these impediments as children, that we can come in with that Kaudacious Wad, that holy staff, that tone, that vibration, and perfect. But we got to get back into mantra. And mantra can't be harnessed by one individual. It has the potential to put you into Jerusalem syndrome, put you into Kundalini syndrome, or the godlike syndrome, they call it. And so this is a sensitive topic, but I will tell you, if you look at the world and you see that it's getting messed up more than it's getting fixed, then you got to go innovation. Innovation is the only thing that collapses time, and Kundalini is the most innovative. It shows as itself the real equation to correcting the imbalance of the wobble that is taking place here on the planet. And so this is a big thing for us. Like, even now the information is just being released, and it hasn't necessarily run its course. It hasn't gone to and fro and run through the land like a bull. Notice how the papal, he releases a bull into the land. This is known that powerful information, when it's released as an edict, it's a charge, it's a decree. It has an enforcer behind it. So once it comes to someone, they cannot doubt it. They have to take it. You see what I mean? And this is the kind of power we move with, but we didn't move with it to destroy each other. The only books that you find about this knowledge now only encourages a person to harness this to gain some kind of level up on the being that is adjacent to them, or the human that may have wronged them, etc. And now we're seeing that it has an entirely different use. So if you put fire in the hands of kids, Prometheus, don't be surprised if a lot of people get burned. But at a certain point...
All right, now hold that thought. Hold that thought, Sevan. We are going into another break, and we'll be coming out in the last half hour.
All right.
Please stay tuned in and call in and join us. We're talking to James Sevan Bomar. But before we get into any conversation, I just want to mention that James' website is AstralQuest, Is that correct?
That's correct, astroquest.com.
Okay, and that's a great way to check in and see some of the things that James has been doing. He also has there's different aspects of that website. He talks about resistance, which is another segment, or maybe you can describe that to us.
Yeah, the Resistance website is actually the website that was created once the book was written. And so what it is it's an archive of not only the spiritual process, but also where we keep all of the information. And of course, you can access these platforms from the astroquest.com website. You'll see different areas that you can go, and you can look into our esoteric library, where there's about 2,000 to 3,000 books that you can read there for free. You can also connect to the AstroQuest platform. We're actually going into season 3 here in March, but we did just come out of season 2 not too long ago, so you can see the archive of all those videos, and they have tons of information in them about just massive stuff. Like, this is not something that we just started doing. We've been doing this now for 4 years. We have a lot of data to back up what we're talking about. Like, we're not on just some frenzy just because, we come out of the body for a couple times. This is a real effort, a real work to expand humanity. As I said, we've bought the noble elements. We got monatomics in another state that's never been done. We're working with some people out in Switzerland that have an intention to assist in expanding humanity as much as they can with their knowledge and their resources. So we got some heavy hitters in this because the projection is stronger. Like, we're spanning out more to demanding what we need rather than hoping for a few scraps, as we call it. The word is peace. Peace means a part of something. It's not whole. So we've learned to ask for peace, which will never give us unity because it's only a part of something. So this is the play on words. This is the codes in the mind. And I wanted to actually close out, because we're getting to the conclusion of today's conversation, but I wanted to release some information about the identity of who the archons really are and why they're so difficult to deal with, because we will have a hard time enlisting other people to help you to defeat these kind of forces, because they're only eidolons, meaning that they only exist in our mind. They are actually mental parasites. This is when something happens to you and you develop a fear. And then because you are a generator, you push power into this fear. And like a show or a character or a scene, you animate it. And thus it comes to life. This is like an incubus or a succubus in a certain tense. And it lives in an impartial state because it's only just that fear or just that problem. And then so what happens is that a lot of the forces that we used to be able to enlist to deal with things like jinn and things of an entirely different species than the archons are not accessible. So this is taking us to be a lot more, like I said, innovative at finding cures for mental disease. And so think about it, like, there's a lot of people who can't even be around other people without starting some level of confusion or going into some level of paranoia. There's a constant breaking up of groups that are coming together because someone comes uncohesive. It's basically the chain is only as strong as the weakest link. And so these kind of things are because through our childhood, when the chakras are being developed, the people need to understand you don't just pop up with chakras. Some chakras never develop for people because they never get to that stage of the consciousness, mainly the top chakras. But the root chakras and things are developed through the age of 2, 3, 4. So all of what happens there on the foundation that you're now standing on definitely affects how you see things in your whole perspective. And so if something has occurred, like some levels of abuse when you're younger, then you function and go throughout life with a dysfunctional root chakra, which is responsible for burning up all the toxins and impurities that infest your mind. So what happens is then the person is, in a sense, a hostage in their own mind, because there's tons of ideas and thoughts that are coming through their mind that are not their ideas and thoughts. These are thoughts that are against their will. So thus, it manifests a reality against your will. So this is, again, the keys to the language, because if you understand how to lock up the wheels on this language, meaning start solving the code of the Desmodema script, realize that this is a 26-letter language, so there's another 26 that goes to it, because that equals 52. 52 cards come out as 52 weeks in a year. This is an Anu, a god of 365 days, which creates a 5 of imperfection. Meaning that if you notice, 360 degrees is a perfect circle. So why are we on 365 days? And would that account for our slight wobble? And then why does this number 5 always become significant every time there's some kind of conflict, or every time there's some kind of fear, every time there's some kind of fire, anytime there's some kind of fight? Phi and 5 always come up. And this is the thing, that when we look into the codes of the language, you realize this is a spell, that you're dealing with art druids and Orthodox Russians that took books from places that they were never even supposed to be removed. But that is now the backup system, because still we're dealing with a far weaker system with technology and mind control now. So we now have a little bit more catching up to do. It's not just beating the idea of not wanting to watch TV all day and not wanting to eat decaying plasma or flesh or animals. It's now also dealing with you'll have to stand face to face with the archon in your mind. And it keeps growing, because it's also being what's our reality every day and how we experience life is adding to this thing. And so that's the confrontation that I was saying. Anybody who goes through the dark night of the soul or goes through a major spiritual enlightenment, they encounter this being on sometimes a real level, like a real vivid level. And then that's when you stand face to face, like I saw Santos do so eloquently, Santos Bonacci on the stairs of the courthouse. You stand in the face of the dragon and tell it what it's about to do. You don't cower away from it or bow down to it or try to worship it, all these different things. You tell it, because it's fire. And this is what I was telling people. If you can't realize that chi and kundalini is fire, if you've ever had it, you'll see how it heats up your body and heats up other things. Then you can't connect that if you can't connect that to the dragon and the dangers of the dragon and the whole mythology of the dragon, then you can't see the forest for the trees, meaning that there is a stage of our involution, I'll give it that term, where we encounter our primordial state, i.e. the dragon, the dinosaur, the big vessels that were holding all of the souls when they first got here off that organic ship. And so that confrontation with the fear of what occurred in those times, in those timelines of our minds, will be encountered, but we would do it together. Because I noticed this one thing when I was younger, when I was a kid, when I was with the boys and the girls that I grew up with, the group, when we went out, we were adventurers because we weren't afraid, because we knew we were going to face it together. It was only when we started trying to go into it by ourselves. This is like trying to move a couch by yourself that's too heavy. You give yourself a hernia. There's no reason. Call in your brothers and sisters. You see what I mean? So that's what we're dealing with now. So instead of trying to pick everyone's message apart and figure out what you agree with, say, he's on our side too. And let's see how many more that we can actually get, because what we are facing, once we come together, we won't be facing it anymore, because the DNA, and this is what we have to see, that everything is hinged on. Any real light worker, when you're working with light, this is what you see. You see DNA, you see patterns. And then when you're going in and you're working on it, this is the light code, then you know that the sensitivity of it, you know what the variations of it are. And for us to move into that level, we have to be a lot less abrasive. It's like a surgeon's work when you go into a person's soul and attempt to correct the imbalances.
That's right.
So
that's right.
It's for sure. I mean, it's like I will say this. There's a book, and I'm reading it now. I'm going to be making it available on the site. It's called Chakra Yoga. And it was already a system here that it was never brought to you like, you do this and you'll activate, do this and you'll activate. That's never how what this whole system of major activation for humans was about. It was, you're going to activate anyway when you do this. So it becomes your choice to whether you want to do this or you want to stay asleep. Because remember, sleep is still a part of the cycles of those who don't want to stay awake indefinitely. And if you think of a planet can go to sleep, and Earth is sleep. It's at a frequency that means sleep. So we don't know how long it's going to be asleep, but I know that for sure there's been some awakenings going on the surface. Mm-hmm. And so that's really all I have to say. I could take this time to again take any questions that may have popped up in the chat box or any calls or anything like that.
Well, we had some callers that were trying to connect with us earlier, and they're not there right now. So Well, hang on. I mean, we welcome anyone to call in, and I'm just checking. The phone number is 267-507-0072. And please call in. I know you had some good questions, and I would love to hear from you. I don't know if, for whatever reason, but we can keep on talking.
For sure, because there was some stuff that we did want to get into. Like I still had our overall list of things that we may have wanted to talk about. And we did get through quite a bit, though. But
we did.
We can always go a little bit. Well, maybe it's time to land the ship a little bit, since we're kind of ending the coming out to the top of the hour, and everyone, it may be PM where you're at, so it's about time to go to sleep. And so in that tense, if there's no or if a call comes in, then we can just take that call. But landing the ship is centering again into oneself and knowing that all is self. We just went through rubble in the Big Bang. We just went through scrap.
Hold on a second. Hold that thought. We do have a caller. Oh, no, they left again.
Okay.
All right.
Well, again, so that's okay. So for everyone to understand, where we are is we're on the other side of the Big Bang. This means that after division took place, aka the Big Bang, this is when there was a splitting of the organism, or splitting of Adam when he was separated from woman, etc. The tree of knowledge, or the tree that if you eat it, ye shall surely die, or surely divide. That has taken place now. And so where we're at is if you look at the sky at night, you'll see a lot of stars in the sky. And as you go into this direction, and this is a metaphor, as you keep going into the proper direction, you'll start seeing that the stars will begin to merge together. Because the light is so intense and so strong that you can't hardly see the separation between one and another. And as you get closer and closer, this happens more and more until you eventually get to this field of completely bright light. That is the point of where the Big Bang occurred. That is actually the seat. That is the control point. That is actually where a bodhisattva sits. Because on the other side of that completely collected white light is the subjective plane, meaning it's pure energy. It's very hard to maintain any kind of data or individuality unless it's super strong in that field. I wouldn't say, though, that there wasn't some beings that weren't known to be able to do it. And this is like when you go into a meditation, you can go into certain meditations that you lose consciousness. And then when you come back for a small period, you have no data. You don't know who you are, where you are, who your mother is. None of that is accessible to you. And then all of a sudden it just starts coming back like a wave. And this is because you are still grounded and you're still anchored into the information center of this planet and your existence here. That's why it's very imperative to make sure that you live it up, because their memories here will have a value to you, just like an old person that's now confined to a certain area, but their memories allow them to expand further. So I would tell everyone is that this is an adventure. It's an EverQuest. It's live and kicking.
It is. Hold on a second. It looks like we have, I think it's Donald.
Okay,
hello, is Donald? Hello?
Yeah.
Hi, how are you tonight?
I'm doing good. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Excellent.
Did you have a question?
Yeah. Wholeness and balance. I was just listening to the show. I guess I was the one that's been calling. I found something wrong with the phone tonight. But, where do we start?
Well, at the end of the show, I guess we got to figure it out fast. I know what you mean, though. We've been ready to start, and then, it's just now, we're just now getting it started up. But yeah, I can definitely address any questions that you have.
Okay. Well, I've been listening for a while now, and man, I'm excited. I'm on the show. It's like I've been chasing you for quite a while now, trying to follow the shows, like the newer ones. When did AstroQuest actually start?
AstroQuest actually starts on the second Sunday of March. And so that's going to be on astroquest.tv. And I haven't announced it because there's a lot into putting this kind of things together, especially to the level that we're at now. And we're obviously going to be coming in with more cohesive information and a lot more stronger content. So to develop that kind of thing has been quite a task, but it's on target. But I just haven't announced it yet because I want to be absolutely sure that we're going to be able to make that timeline. But realistically, the messages are already ready to go. It's some of the stuff that's already been encased in the shows previously, but now all the graphical stuff that I kept talking about and all the literary stuff that I kept talking about will be introduced. So the main thing about the new season is that we'll have more of a fluid system of communication and also transferring of data in real time, not only during the show but in between shows. So in a certain sense, we're more synchronistic because we're not missing a beat. And this I find to be awesome because I'm coming in contact with stuff, and it's just very rare to get a hold of many of these things. And in real time, I want to be able to pass that knowledge to people. But we just recently went over the entire, if you want to call it, revelation of how all of the stuff in the ocean, including the spores for the plants and all that kind of stuff, is the origins of much of what we're seeing on land. And that we have another kind of connection with these shells and these large brain squid and these bioluminescent entities that are living in this ocean that nobody is jumping off into. And in fact, I'm in Costa Rica, so there's obviously quite a few different places you can get into the ocean. But every time I get in there, it is one of the most unpredictable places. Like, you can't actually know what you're going to see from one point to the next. And it gets a little startling sometimes how many things you could see that are not exactly on the geometry that we're on. But what I'm saying is that there's a lot of undiscovered territories. But I want to reveal this too. Remember that this whole idea of enlightenment and illumination and all this stuff actually took place between 1800 and 1900 in a time known as the Enlightenment era. And you have to Google that, and you'll see that in Wikipedia, an entry of the Enlightenment era. And during this time, much of all of the knowledge and trinkets and relics and all this stuff that was in the world was sequestered by the king of Britain and many of the organizations that were still the lineage of the pharaohs, etc. But they basically created a place like a pawn shop that if you found something rare, you can count on getting paid for it if you bought it in. And so they would catalog all this stuff, and then the learned of the time will go in and start studying all the things that were collected. And so there were books that were there was a lot of imagery of the things that were collected, and this has done wonders for bringing me in the know about what's really going on. But I noticed that at a certain point, once a certain level of knowledge was figured out, the books were closed and everything was made hidden. And then the secret societies were developed. So realize that the secret societies that you're dealing with today they came after the Enlightenment era, because the individuals who had found out this knowledge about the ocean and about our real origins and all that did seek, after they discovered it, to use it as a form of currency, a form of energy, harnessing a jinn, they would call it, meaning that being able to utilize the spiritual energy of an individual as a resource like oil. So we, again, have to be really leery in a sense of what's going on around us, because we can't always base everyone else's intelligence on our own. Sometimes we need to learn things before we would say that we're actually at the level of some of these beings that have been doing this kind of thinking all their life, meaning thinking about what's real, or what I call it, what's actual, the actuality. And the difference is reality is what you think is going on. Actuality is what is actually going on. And it has a tendency to be two different things when you're in these kind of programs. But I know that we're going to be all right. Like, that's not something that I really question. We have an immortality, and that is something that we need to grasp by being awake, understanding that we can carry our existence and our memories that we have here beyond, meaning when you die, you can still have this if they're strong enough, if your core is tight enough, if your magnetic bind cannot be blown away by a cosmic wind. This means if something flies by that you think is more entertaining than you or more brighter than you, that you don't go and wander after it and serve it. Now, we're not saying that you can't join with other entities and share and increase the level of light and increase the level of energy, but be very leery of other entities that just want you to endorse them or worship them, serve them, or basically delegate your energy to them. And that's why we believe in understanding. We believe in empowering the individual, giving them the keys to make the necessary transformation, and then finally placing the choice within the hands of the beholder. That places you back in the control seat. It puts you right on the corpus callosum. You're no longer in the left or the right hemisphere, and you are now in full broadcast to your body in balance. And so remember, when you achieve balance, everything that you do, everything that you create, it reflects that. So until then, still it works like that. Everything we do, everything we create reflects what's going on inside of us. So we clean out the insides and we get the results that we're really looking for. It's that simple.
So Donald, tell me how long you've been following Sevan and listening to some of his videos and other things that he's done, all of his works.
Actually, for probably around 9 months.
Okay.
I just caught on. Actually, my mother told me about him. I was, kind of doing some research on, actually where we come from. I'm really into science, so I try to keep up with science as much as possible. And I often notice that things in science people aren't really talking about. Kind of the newer stuff. I actually lived in Monterey Bay for a little while. I went to school there, and they would often find prehistoric animals, pop up because it's a pretty deep basin over there. And I realized that, we would hear about it, but not too many other people would be talking about it. And I thought it was fascinating that, to even find this type of stuff down there. But, so I'm sorry, I'm off topic. But, so I've been following for about 9 months. I'm really into, the cutting edge stuff, and we're missing some things with my mother. And, I kind of try to bring her into what I thought was update. So, she had mentioned him one day. I guess I came across one of his videos and thought I would like him. So, she played the video for me, and I liked it. It's stuff I've been asking for this whole time, So, found him and, try to get recently. There's a lot of videos out there, and I'm still catching up. I mean, there's so much information that I'm just trying to absorb, and so.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much. We have another caller coming in.
I appreciate it, brother, for calling
in.
in.
That's awesome. Thank you, Donald.
Thank you.
Hello, we have yes.
I appreciate it, brother.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you, Donald.
Hi, this is Daryl. Can you hear me?
Hi, Daryl. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
We got 3 minutes.
Yeah, I was curious, Sevan, what are some of your favorite physical practices to develop dream power and astral travel?
You may have to turn the radio down in the back, but personally, I found the whole body breathing in the Chi machine to be the greatest stimulators, especially when you're about to go to sleep. And the whole body breathing is, of course, understanding how to push air into the stomach area of the body and to push it all the way into the diaphragm. And we have some videos on the website about that. And the Chi machine is a device that moves at a specific frequency, and this frequency is 2 times the speed of your heart, and it basically just shakes your legs. But this causes a strange phenomenon where the body's kundalini starts to shake up from the base area or the low area up into the higher parts of the body. And so thus when you go to sleep, you have the fuel that's needed for the thrust. And I can't urge you enough, like what you're really dealing with is in this other spatial, you need thrust, literally. And the fuel that is necessary to get the thrust is the chi or the prana. And so the more of this stuff that you have, the more you have to power that vehicle to even turn it on. This means actually becoming lucid. Okay, I'm asleep. And then from that point to be able to move around, because it'll actually feel like you're moving through sludge if you don't have enough thrust. But to actually move around, you would need this more movement of the energy. So of course, whole body cleansing, which of course is the cleansing kits, and clean the organs so that they have the ability to vibrate. Because also remember, if something builds up around the organ, if it's a calcium, if it's a mucoid plaque, whatever, it's going to keep it from vibrating just like a shell is around it. Like somebody's holding you and stopping you from vibrating. And so what you want to do is cleaning that out, gets it moving, and then you're able to oscillate into the frequencies that are associated with you being conscious in that state.
Okay, well, I hate to say that, but we're
That's
just
it.
about at the end of the show, and I have enough time to say thank you, and thank you, Daryl, for calling in. We're down to about 46 seconds. Please, if anyone is interested, contact Sevan. It's at www.astral. astralquest.com, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. All this show is archived. You'll be able to listen to it sometime later tomorrow. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Sevan.
Thank you.